Hi everyone, and welcome to our daily show, The Big Story, where we discuss the hottest topics of the day right here in the heart of the newsroom. My name is Alyssa Wu, and I'm coming to you live from the Straits Times. We are streaming live right now on Facebook and also on YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube, do subscribe to our channel and be notified whenever we go live by clicking that bell button. I'll be joined very shortly by my newsroom colleagues, where we'll discuss the topics that got you talking today. Now, climate change was one of the main topics covered by Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong in his National Day Rally speech on Sunday. And to follow up on that, the Straits Times will be putting out a special package on climate change tomorrow. How climate change affects Singapore and what Singaporeans think about it. To share more about what to expect from this upcoming package, I have Audrey and Vanessa here with me. Hi both.
Hi. Hello.
Hello. So can you tell us briefly what this package will cover?
It consists of a poll, two main stories, and a commentary.
So maybe a bit more about the poll. Maybe you can tell us about it without giving the figures away.
Okay, so basically we want to find out what are the attitudes of Singaporeans towards climate change after Prime Minister's speech. And we asked them questions such as, well, first of all, did you watch the NDR speech? And are you familiar with the speech, the part of the speech where the PM talks about climate change? What are your, is climate change a concern for you? And so what's the main takeaway from the speech that you have? And one of them, or rather the majority of respondents actually said that their main takeaway was that Singapore is vulnerable to sea level rises.
So they are aware of, at least of climate change, right, and how it impacts Singapore.
Yes.
So roughly who did you poll?
We polled, we tried to get a diverse demographic, so across race, gender, and age group as well. Yeah.
Okay. Audrey, I understand there's about two main stories in the package. Can you share what the stories are?
So one of our main stories would be about the poll that Vanessa was talking about, and the other one would be on how experts were reacting to PM Lee's focus on engineering feats as a way for Singapore to tackle with sea level rise. As Vanessa mentioned earlier, a lot of the respondents found sea level rise, like they took, one of the main messages they took away from PM's message was that sea level rise is an issue that threatens Singapore, and rightly so, because according to an international panel of scientists, sea level rise is expected to go up by 1 meter in 2100, which is not that far away. So in his speech, PM Lee highlighted how Singapore was planning to deal with this over the long term. So he cited a figure, $100 billion investment over 100 years. And among the strategies that he laid out include things like carrying out empoldering. So that's a kind of land reclamation technique along East Coast, which is one of the parts of Singapore most vulnerable to sea level rise. And another thing would be reclaiming a series of offshore islands on East Coast. He also talked about how PUB was looking into building a second pump house opposite Marina Barrage, and the pump house houses pumps, which pumps water from the reservoir out into the sea. So when this happens, it kind of frees up room within the reservoir to contain rain when it falls into the city. So basically, the empoldering and the reclamation of offshore islands in East Coast are considered kind of major engineering feats. So we spoke to some experts and got their input on what they thought of that. So the main takeaway from that was that they said yes. So Singapore is very vulnerable to sea level rise. So we have to look at a whole series of options available to us. Engineering feats like what PM Lee shared during his rally speech. These are options that are very viable for Singapore, but there are also alternatives to consider as well. Things like using mangroves and natural ecosystems as a buffer. But as PM Lee highlighted, these are not engineering plans that he shared. These are just ideas that the government is exploring. So I guess we just have to wait and see.
So aside from rising sea levels that we need to be careful about, there's also the issue of rising temperatures. So how does Singapore plan to combat the rising temperatures and keep the city cool?
Yeah, so while sea level rise is a long-term threat, rising temperatures is something that all of us are already feeling. So there is this project that's ongoing now by a couple of universities here. It's called the Cooling Singapore Project, and in it they are researching various ways of how to cool Singapore without necessarily turning on the air conditioner, which actually contributes to the global emissions. So some strategies include things like looking at urban greenery. Urban greenery would be things like your green walls and green roofs, and that could help lower temperatures. things like installing water features within like a development, or things like using light-colored building structures and all that as a way to reflect heat. So these are just alternatives, or these are just ways that Singapore is looking into to beat the heat.
Now, why do you think Singaporeans should care about climate change and the special that's coming out tomorrow?
I think beyond building defenses such as seawalls and polders, right? I think we can, as consumers, could think about what we can do to help fight climate change. What I gotten from my interviews with the men in the street is that the uncles and aunties will say, "I'm just an uncle. I'm just a housewife. What can I do?" You see, let the government do the job lah. Let the government do this, and then the government will be like, "We can't do everything. The businesses have to try. The businesses have to try to cut down pollution," and then the businesses will say, "We can't do away with plastics." The uncle and aunties will complain. So actually, it comes out of it. Consumers do have a responsibility, and we do have we can effect change with our actions, and that's what I hope PM raising this alarm in NDR speech can actually send a message out to Singaporeans to do that.
Yep. Thank you. Audrey, do you have anything to add on, or you more or less agree with what Vanessa has said?
I just have a little bit more to say. So, I mean, I've been reporting on the environment for a few years now, and some feedback that I got from my friends, from readers, is like, it's just the environment. But I feel like climate change actually goes beyond that. It's no longer just an environmental issue. It's related to things that are actually keeping us alive, things like our food security, our water security, even if you don't care about plants and animals. So, I mean, to me, I just feel that, dealing with climate change is just a way to keep all of us alive, us and our future generations alive.
Well, thank you so much, Audrey and Vanessa, for sharing about it. You can look out for the package on straitstimes.com tomorrow or in the papers. Now on to our second story. More children in Singapore are being diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, each year, with demand for places in schools for them going up as well. In the past 5 years, public hospitals reported an annual increase of about 15% of autism cases among children aged up to 6 years old. The steady rise is due to parents who are now better educated and more aware of the condition and improvements in the diagnosis process. Naturally, there is growing demand for places in autism-focused schools, and two such schools, Pathlight and Eden, are expanding. So to tell us more, we have Goh Yan Han here with us. Hi.
Hello.
So how did this story come about?
So in July, I went for a Pathlight event where they were opening an inclusive worksite. And at the same time, they also announced that in 2023, they would be opening a second permanent campus in Tampines. And they said the reason for that was the increased demand for places that they were seeing. So at that point, it was a very small point in my story. So I wanted to know why was there the increased demand. And that's why I went to dig around, and that's how this story appeared.
Just like a curious journalist. So in your story, you wrote about how there will be special needs schools which are expanding in Singapore, as well as the increased enrollment of special needs children in mainstream schools. So what has led to this increase?
So the key factors that experts I spoke to said were basically increased awareness and as well as better diagnosis processes. So these are actually not factors unique to Singapore. This is actually happening worldwide as more people are getting more educated. So these are basically what causes more people to go for screenings or send their children to screenings when they see like that their children have developmental issues.
So it's not necessarily that more children are being autistic, it's just that more are being diagnosed as compared to maybe 10, 20 years before?
It's possible that also back then, these children just went undiagnosed, because there wasn't the awareness that there was this condition.
So I think it's great that society is becoming more aware and trying to be more inclusive of people with autism and special needs. But do you think more can be done, especially in the school setting and then maybe society?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the people I spoke to for my package was this 31-year-old guy. So he has autism, and he spoke of his childhood growing up in a mainstream school where he said people would pick on him and misunderstand him. So definitely for people with special needs, there's still this stigma around them. And then a parent that I spoke to also said that, these people don't want to be excluded, but then sometimes due to their social skills, they end up being excluded. So I think what is really important now is, more integration into society in terms of, more people being aware about it, having more acceptance and being more welcome to these people, as well as also, when they grow up and graduate out of school, being more inclusive in the workforce. I think that's very important,
Now you mentioned that schools here have at least one teacher who are trained to work
Yes.
with children with special needs?
So, in a lot of, I think in most, if not all of MOE schools, there's this one teacher or personnel, you call it, is an allied educator for learning and behavioral support. So they and their care management team will actually, look after these children. But I think more can still be done for more educators to be able to recognize and be equipped with the skills to treat this kind of children in schools, in both, special schools and mainstream schools. And I think this is also something that the Lian Foundation report in May this year also mentioned.
Maybe now it's a good time to maybe briefly describe to our viewers the different autism spectrum.
Yeah, so in the latest DSM-5, which is this handbook or manual that healthcare professionals use to diagnose these children, they actually said that autism is not just one disorder, it's a whole spectrum. So they have very varying needs. So you have those more on the less severe side, so they're more of high functioning. So previously we would call this Asperger's syndrome, but under DSM-5 actually they're just all on the spectrum. But we still use the Asperger's syndrome label quite often. Yeah, so you have more high functioning autism kids, and then you have the more severe needs. So most of the common challenges that kids with autism face are things like social communication problems, or they like to stick to routines and then they feel distressed when their routines are disrupted, or sometimes they also have fine motor skills. So depending on where you fall on the spectrum, these might be more severe, and then this might lead you to have troubles maybe with daily life, or if you're more high functioning, you might be able to enroll in a mainstream school.
So you also wrote another story where you explore how tech is actually helping children with autism. Can you elaborate a bit more on that one?
So I think what some parents mentioned was that e-learning has been a huge help for their kids, so they are able to do e-learning and use those online platforms. And for the kids themselves, like now you have YouTube, you have internet, Facebook, whatever. So a lot of autism kids they have fixated interests, so they're very interested in certain topics, and then they can also harness the internet to find out what they want. And I think schools are also bringing tech on board, so like I think Pathlight announced coding lessons, and some other schools have digital skill lessons coming up as well.
And this helps them because they can learn at their own pace, as fast or as slow as they want to.
Yeah,
so that's the advantage, that's the benefit of tech.
Yeah, definitely. And then you can do your revision online through the e-learning platforms. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you so much, Yan Han, for sharing more about your story. At this point, I'd like to highlight a video by the Straits Times which came out last year, which focused on 2 artists with autism. This episode is in the 2nd season of the video series Heroes Among Us, and it features Glenn Phua and Ezra Chan. You can watch this video at this link below. There you go. So those were our top stories for the day. And thank you for joining us. For more news and videos, do log on to straitstimes.com. Once again, I'm Melissa. Join us again tomorrow, same time, same place, for more big stories.